Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Aiken, and welcome to my world, building manageable applications end to end. I'm going to start this session with a short story, a family road trip, because it's relevant, believe me. Having moved from England to America, we decided to buy a really environmentally friendly car there. It's a 5.8 litre Yukon, and it's my wife's car. And we decided to take the family, my wife, myself, 3 children, up to Mount Rainier, which is the local mountain in Seattle. To get there from my house is a little drive. It's about 100 miles, takes about an hour and 30 minutes or so. It's a nice drive. When you get there, the views are spectacular. You're on top of all the other mountains that you see in the area, and you're looking down on them. It is fantastic. Now, on the way back, we took a wrong turn. And being a man, we kept on going the wrong way. Sometimes the road looked like this. You'll notice the road because the stones are closer together than the stones in the field. This is a nice shot of our car on such a road in the middle of nowhere. Now, you might be wondering, why is the car not moving? That's why the car wasn't moving. That is a fuel pump. Apparently, you need that to make your car go. My kids really do talk to me now. Eventually, to cut a long story short, we got to the nearest town, which was quite somewhere away. We managed to get a temporary repair, and we managed to get all the way home, which my family delight in telling me was a whole bunch more time on top of what we'd spent already getting there. So 2 hours to get to the mountain, 2 hours on the mountain, and about 5 or 6 hours to get back home. It was a good trip. So why do I tell you this? Why do I share this story from my family? Well, when we got back, the car was in need of somebody to go and look at it. So we took it to the local garage. And me not knowing anything about cars, I'm expecting them to start unplugging things and rebooting stuff and turning it off and on and see if they could figure out. Kind of like what we do to software. We, try resetting the machine, try restarting, pull the cables out, plug them back in, all those kind of things. And they didn't. What impressed me is they plugged the computer in and the car told them exactly what was wrong. And in about 20 seconds or so, they knew it was the fuel pump. How cool is that? And I thought, this is a great story to start our talk with today about software. Some of the screens that, and I stole these from the internet here, we can get all sorts of information about your car. How fast it's been going, what the fuel consumption's like, what the temperature's like. Any of those thresholds on any of the components that are wired up in a modern car, we just plug it in and it gives us all this rich information. And I thought, fantastic. Why doesn't my line of business software do that? Why do I have to still reboot it, restart it, uninstall and reinstall, give it a kick, and then call the developer? So today's talk is all about how we can fix that, how we can make our applications not suck when they get deployed. Now, I'm a developer, and I have to talk to IT pros. And when we do this and we talk to customers, we have all sorts of value propositions for making you do extra work to make your application be more manageable. And I've got numerous slides talking about the total cost of ownership, lowering that, lowering support costs, improving customer satisfaction. And I was sitting there the other night and I thought, for devs, the really thing we care about is if we get the operations folks to fix the problem, it means we don't have to fix the problem. And how many people here have been working on some cool thing like WPF or WCF or, I'm playing with workflow now, and you get that dreaded call. There's a bug in application version X. Can you fix it? Yes. So now you have to go and find which source control machine that particular version of that particular software is in. You have to find a machine to check it out onto. You have to then try and recreate the problem on that machine so you can figure out what the bug was. Then you fix it, the 1 or 2 lines. You recompile it, you run all the tests again, you do whatever it takes. And then you get the fix back down to the data center or the customer, and then, several hours later, you can go back to doing what you get paid to do and what is the fun part of your job, unless you're a little twisted and you like fixing things. So we want to kind of prevent that. We want to make that story a lot nicer for you. So we have this whole thing called design for operations, and it's about making applications more manageable. And what do we mean by that? And again, I've got oodles of things that talk about all the pros and cons and things, and I thought, no, you're a dev, what do we mean by this? Exposing critical health and performance data. We want to know when your app's not working, like the car. The car told us that the fuel pump wasn't working. It gave us all sorts of temperature readings on various components, how hot the coolant was, or I don't know, understand those things. But it give us that information. Our apps need to give the outside world the same kind of information. Is it healthy or not? It's easy to spot when your app's not healthy because the user calls up. Wouldn't it be great if the user didn't have to call up because we were already fixing it, or the operations people were already fixing it? And here's another question for you. How do you know your app's actually working until somebody uses it? And that's another problem. You can imagine something like MSN.com. We can't just wait till somebody goes and uses it to find out if it's working or not. You know, look at that infrastructure, and there's a lot of things going on all the time to make sure that when something does go wrong, we're the first people to know about it. We want to do that for your apps. We want to enable seamless deployment. What I mean by that is not X-copy deployment, right? I'm going to find whoever said X-copy deployment was a great thing, and I'm going to shoot them and I'm going to bury them. Because X-copy normally involves X-copy plus a registry hack or two, plus a couple of config files here and there, and you have to copy that DLL into the Windows System 32 folder. And if you run gakutil and install util, and then just rewire that XML file, then it's deployed. And I'm not sure about you, but that sounds like a bit of a long-winded way. I like it when we double-click on an MSI, and it all goes and does all of those things. What I like even better is when I click on uninstall and it gets rid of everything. Admin tools. My admins go, Dave, we don't need you to build any admin tools. You can just cut that bit from the talk. He's telling me this with the biggest grin on your face you have ever seen. So I set myself up to be shot, and I say, why? And he tells me, we have Notepad. Isn't that how we configure .NET applications now with Notepad? And I go, yeah, you have a point. XML config files are great. They're human readable. Have you been in service model? Who understands that? No, I'm sorry. The IT Pro doesn't have Visual Studio installed. They have Notepad and other such nice tools. So we need to think about how do we give them an admin tool that they can actually reconfigure our app and not miss off that bracket. If you've ever sat for days trying to work out why something didn't work and it was an XML config file missing a bracket somewhere, you get the idea. I love cartoons, I love little silly pictures, and I've got loads of them in here. They can predict earthquakes and seizures, why not server failures? That just kind of fits with this. Health modeling. A few years ago, we started talking about our initiative called DSI, Dynamic Systems Initiative. And we talked about how we'd build models, and then we'd manage things based upon these models. And then we said it was a 10-year plan, and then we kind of went away. On the IT Pro side, we've done lots and lots of things with System Center and all those kind of products. But we haven't really given you very much on the dev side of things. And when I used to stand up in front of audiences and say, hey, you need to have events and perf counters in your apps, and then I went through the manual process of creating all those, you could see everybody kind of going, is it rude to leave halfway through? I'm not sure. I'm not going to do this. It looks like hard work. So now we have some tooling which we hope is going to help you put this thing together. We're pretty proud of what we're doing here. You could be the first lot of people outside of Microsoft who've seen this tool. It's not a big flashy announcement, certainly not keynote material at this stage. But what the tool allows you to do is build a health model for your application. You can define events and performance counters and WMI things. Fantastic. What it will also do is it will also discover all of the events and perf counters that you already have in your application, and then you can wire them up into the model. What it will also do is it will also generate code for all of your events and performance counters that you've designed. So in English, that means you build a model, you define an event, and it will write the code for you. And that's pretty neat. We even write the installer for you, which I think is just amazing. kind of. So that's great. Makes it easy to do those things, but there's another step. There's the IT Pro step. Wouldn't it be great if we give the IT Pro some way of monitoring our application? Well, we have System Center, and we have System Center Operations Manager, which IT Pros can use to manage everything, like the server, the SQL, IIS, the hubs, the switches, everything. You know, it really does a great job of that. This tool generates a management pack, which they can import and start monitoring your application. And it's as simple as that. You hit a big shiny button, spits out the management pack, give it with your software, with your installer to the IT Pro, and they've got two things. They load the management pack, they load your software, and everybody is happy. That's the story anyway. Who knows if we'll ever make them happy. So I'm going to switch to the demo machine. And I'm in Visual Studio 2008. Because of timing, the Visual Studio Management Model Designer, as a tongue twister, will be a CTP around January timeframe. They're slating for December, but we all know how we build software, so it'll be January, more than likely. So I'm going to show you through the tool, give you a quick look at what it can do. So here I've already defined part of a health model. We're built upon a DSL, and I've dragged a managed entity into my design surface here. And a managed entity is just that. It's what thing are we going to manage. In this case, I'm going to add some instrumentation to a Windows service. So this is our model, and being a DSL, we have this designer associated with it. Now, the user interface needs some work, so bear with me on this. Right? I compile this on my machine to demo it. Right? I don't install it with an MSI. I just want to, you know, set the expectation here that this is a rough cut of the end product. But the functionality is all there. It does do everything it says on the box. So here I've got my managed entity. I can expand that, and I do have a recipe for discovering existing instrumentation. That doesn't work at this time in this particular build. I do have the ability to create my own instrumentation, and that's the piece I'm going to do here. Now, I have to mention trust levels just because I click on it a few times. What we realize is our ultimate goal is for you to write perhaps an event to the application log. And sometimes you can't do that because you're working in a secure environment, you don't have access to it, you've uploaded it to an ISV host or something, and they won't let you do that. So we do have the ability to specify different sets of configuration for this, and we've called it trust levels, because that is how we think of it in our minds. We have a normal trust level, which is something I created actually, which is just default. We could then go and create a low trust level where we're not going to write to the application log, we're going to write to a text file or a database or some alternative. So that's a little bit about that. It needs lots more explaining, but we've only got 75 minutes. So I've already defined an event called service start, and over in the dialog box here we've got the event ID, which is 1000. We've got the instrumentation level, so we have two switches there. We can go coarse or we can go fine, so you can have a bunch of things that are just off as a default, and then you can flip them on if you need more information. I've given it a message template, and this is the text that will appear inside the event log, and we can put parameters in as well. We could do %1, %2 for specifying parameters. We actually generate all of the resource files you need for events, so you don't even have to worry about building those things. I have an implementation here which is actually a full-blown application log event. So this event here is an abstract event. I could implement it going to WMI, I could implement it going to the application log, I could implement it going to a text file. Here, we've got it implementing to the application log. So let's create a new event. Let's just see the process here. I'm going to add a new event. I can give it a number here, 1001. Specify course, message template, service stopped. Give it a name, service stopped. We'll put %1 in. We're going to pass a parameter in. You'll appreciate I'm not going to build a real health model in 75 minutes and implement it and talk about all the other things I need to talk about. But I want to show you this through the tool here. So there's my event. Service stopped there. In fact, if I put the %1 on the end of the message template, it will work even better. Next, what I can do is I can go and add an event parameter. So this is the first parameter, and this could be like server name, and it's the first parameter in the list here. So we can give everything a name. We'll give it now an implementation, so we'll add a new event log event. It's kind of informational, so I'm going to change that. And now we're working with specific event log settings here. And I do need to supply a source. Dinner Now service portfolio is the service that we're playing with here. So there's my implementation and my new event. The goal is to have a wizard, so you can go right-click, new event, and you get taken through a little wizard that will collect all of that data. So you're not jumping around inside this little model tree we have. Of course, download the tool. Any suggestions you have, we'd love to hear. I have this normal trust level here. I've already wired up service start to normal. So I'm gonna add service stopped as well. And that just assigns that event to that particular trust level. So now we're good. What we can do is validate the model. And we'll get a list of any errors that we have. I haven't turned the validation off. I just validated it before I started so I could fix the 72 problems I normally have when I demo this. So it saves us a little bit of time there. Now, the other node I want to quickly show you is the health definition. So we've defined some instrumentation, but we haven't actually explained what that means to our managed entity. So I'm going to add a new aspect. And the way to think of this is, which aspect of the managed entity am I interested in monitoring? So it's which bit of the service, right? But bit of the service doesn't kind of get past our wording people. So we call them aspects. So I could give it here, and I could just do service info. And here's where we kind of get a little bit ops managery. We can pick some of the standard ops manager categories from here: availability, configuration, security, and performance. I'm going to log this one under availability. And here's what I'm going to ask operations manager to do. When it sees the service started, it's going to flag everything up as green. When it sees the service stop message, it's going to warn me and flag everything up red. It's very simple, but it really does illustrate the point here. So now we'll try and validate all. And the problem we've done is we've added the aspect, but we haven't told it what means green, what means red. So let's go and add a green health state to this. And we add a new event formula. And service start is the event we're doing. If we'd already discovered the event, we'd fill that part of the dialog box in. Like I say, the interface needs a little bit of work. A little bit being a kind of nice way of saying it. So let's add a new event formula for the red state, and simple. So service start is green, service stop is red. It's always good to have both. In fact, the model will kind of insist on both. And that's a little difficult sometimes to kind of get your head around how you can do the green bit. The red bit's easy because you could have an exception. You go, oh, cool, I'm going to write this red thing. But how do you do the green thing? So you do have to think a little bit about how you can implement this. But it always is good to know when the problem's fixed. Otherwise, everybody who just jumped in that car at 3 a.m. in the morning to get there, and the server was rebooting or something, and that's why it went red, get a little bit annoyed. Can't imagine why. So let's save that. Let's go and validate it now, make sure we're good. We're getting recommendations here saying that we should fill out some IT pro requirement of having some description and knowledge base information in there. Yeah. We should, of course, do that all the time, just not in this demo. So now I have some recipes. So we do need the guidance automation extensions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate my instrumentation helper. I'm going to pick my model. I'm going to click on accept. and all being well, the moon's aligned and everything like that, we should end up with a bucket full of solutions and projects added to my thing. So it'll take a few seconds to generate. What it's going to do is it's going to generate an abstract event class that I can call in. And then based upon configuration, whether it's normal or low trust or whatever, and the course level we've set, the instrumentation level, whether it's coarse or fine, it will actually implement a factory to build the right, to implement the right kind of settings for that. So when you look at it, it does actually generate quite a lot of code, and lots of people look and go, Let's just quickly have a look through here. So I have my instrumentation API. This is the main class that I'm going to interact with as a developer. All the rest will be created and used based upon my configuration settings. Now, we even give you the config file. How annoying is it that you get code and then somewhere in the README it says, oh yes, you have to wire it in the config, and you go, well, give me an example. Right? We actually give you the config as well, so you can cut and paste that into your app. I think that's cool, only because I've moaned about it so many times. So here's my instrumentation API. Here's my instrumentation helper. We've implemented a few things in here. One, we've got a get instance. We have some events here, and I've clicked on the wrong class. What a banana. That's what I want. At least that's what I want to show you. So we write all of the code that implements the event. So you don't have to do it. And we do it properly, apparently. So we have a resource file and everything. So here we're setting up some things. It's code you don't have to type. If we go into the event log implementation for this, we actually give you, first of all, the message file. So we generate all of that message file. And I know some of you are sitting here and going, I didn't know you needed a message file. I just used to do event write and then put a string in there. Yeah, you really should have a message file. We give you the batch file that compiles the message file into the resource DLL that the event viewer in your application needs. So we give you all that bit as well. We even give you the event installer as well. Now, at the moment, we give you a typical Visual Studio style installer. Hopefully, with the CTP, we'll also give you a Wix code snippet as well, so you can go and put that into your real installation. Assuming you use Wix, of course. We've got some library code there. We give you the source, so there's no kind of dirty mysteries or anything in there. And like I say, we give you the config. So let's go and wire this up a little bit. We're going to make this work in our application. So I'm going to go into source, into my host, and we're going to play with the console host here so we can run it interactively and see what's going on. We just have to do a little bit of merging with the config file here. So we give you the config sections in the application section here. What I do need to do is just going steal that from there, put it into there. Otherwise, we end up with two configuration sections and the thing boffs. But that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to merge it with your file here. The other thing we have to do is add the trust level. And we give you little to-do markers. That's clever as well. So that'll show up on any of your to-do lists and things like that. So trust level, normal. And we also give you the instrumentation level to do as well. So this should be course like so. So that should be our app config file wired up. Next thing we want to do is we'll just pop into, and we'll add some code here. So let's go and add some references. And we'll go into projects, and we want to add the instrumentation things. I'm doing a demo just to be on the safe side. I'm going to reference everything. Super. Now, one thing to note is that when we build our instrumentation, and at this point, I'm just going to rebuild the solution, just make sure we haven't introduced any nasty things doing this. When we generate that message file, we have to manually go and add that to our project, right? We haven't figured quite how we discover what your deployment project is and be able to do that for you, but we do have to do some moving of files around. But if we write all the code for you, we might get away with you having to copy a file, maybe. So we're doing good so far. View code. So this is my console host. What I'm going to do, as soon as the console starts, I'm going to write the start event. When it finishes, I'm going to write the stop event. It couldn't be easier. Well, it could be, but done it now. And the namespace is so we're using the singleton pattern, so it's a one-liner. That's all you need to do. And remember, we added that parameter in, server name. It's give us the parameter in the thing, so we know exactly what we need to put in there. I'm just going to put David in there. Why not? So now we've implemented. We have another recipe that can go through the model and check it's all been implemented as well. We don't check how well it's been implemented. We just check that you've got a call into each raise event and increment perf counter and all that kind of thing. So you can do a little bit of validation to make sure that you've actually implemented the model there. Now we're almost good to go. There's a few things we need to do. We will do a rebuild all again, and while that's going on, we're just going to copy that resource file into the right folder. So I'm going to go into my dinner now solution for the service portfolio, into instrumentation, into the event log events, and into bin, debug. Execute that so we get the DLL. Where's the DLL gone? Nana. Just help if you're in the right command prompt. Solution, dinner now. Service portfolio bin. Instrumentation. And then, and that fails as well. Fantastic. Well, what that should have done is created the resource file for me, but for some reason it's not finding the link. I ain't going to bother working out why that's happened. That's bizarre. That's a shame as well. The other thing I want to show you is, so we've got the instrumentation code. What do we give the IT Pro? Because now we have an app that should kind of write events and all that kind of thing. What do we give the IT Pro? Well, we've got the Generate Management Pack for Ops Manager 2007. We've got a little wizard we have to fill in, including the destination. So I'm just going to drop this onto Let's put it in the root of dinner now up there so we can easily find it. This is what my management pack is going to be called. And look, that's it. I have to give it 3 things on there. So I click on finish, and while that goes and generates it, and in fact it's done it, there's one more thing I just want to point out to you on here. You don't have to do any magic. You don't have to do any kind of configuration to tell Operations Manager where your app is, right? What you do is in the managed entity here, you can specify exactly how Operations Manager should find your app. So it will do it automatically. You could install this on machines, and if Ops Manager is looking after them, it will see your app, and it will flag up in Ops Manager and start monitoring it. So there's not even any deployment thing going on there. The way we do it in the demo, typically we specify the path to the file. Now, that's kind of hard because it could be anywhere in real life. Some of the other options include specifying that it's going to be a registry value, which you could populate when when it gets installed. It also can be an ASP.NET application as well. So in this case, it's what the IIS application name typically is. We can monitor web executables and services out of the box. And there's a few other types that we'll be adding, but those are the 3 main ones there. So let's just pop back into dinner now, and here's our generated management pack. I'm going to open it up in my management pack editor. So this is where we get a bit of a taste of our own medicine. And it's generated the management pack. I don't know if you're familiar with what a management pack looks like, but it's in 2007, it's an XML file, and it's a big XML file with all of the discovery code in, all the event code in, and everything like that. So we do a good job of putting that together. Typically, next steps is we give that to the IT pro. They would load it into Ops Manager, and then they can start monitoring your application there. So that's the tooling that we have coming. It's called the Visual Studio Management Model Designer. We did have a version last March which did some of these things. It's available on Codeplex. I don't encourage you to get that version because it's old, and we've made lots of changes with this one. This one should be available around about January for a CTP. You will need Visual Studio 2008, but it won't work in Express. It'll work in, I think, Professional and above for there. We want it to, so that you can build manageable applications no matter how you're doing it. Going back to the DSI story, it does align with the CML types that the SML people are doing. Now, if that sentence made sense to you, fantastic. If it didn't, look up SML. It's what SDM turned into. And if you remember a while back when we started talking about Visual Studio 2005, and the designers in there were using SDM, SDM evolved, obviously, and now we're into SML, which is just a continuation from that. So configuration. So that was the health part of it. Some tooling to come along to make that easy for you. Configuration. In a data center, it's not just your app, it's the other 1,499 apps that they have to manage. And sometimes I think that picture is really good of showing you the mess they have to do it, although that's quite nice compared to some of the things we give them. Now, for configuration, if we're in the .NET world, we have the XML configuration files. And the great thing about the XML configuration files is we went and built those, and we didn't talk to the Windows management people. How bright are we sometimes? So all of the management technologies in Windows, like group policy, which works with the registry, like WMI, just didn't get anywhere near these .NET configuration files. So there's a bit of a mismatch going on there. We're fixing that now, obviously. And we don't want you to change from what you're doing. We want to keep your config in the XML config files, because when we fix it in the framework, you will just get it automatically. But I do want to talk just 1 minute about group policy. If you build desktop applications, the easiest thing you can do for your IT pros is to enable group policy. All it means that you've got to do is read from the registry some key settings that you want the administrator to be able to change. What they can then do, it's a bit more complicated than that, obviously, but this is the general idea. You read some parameter from the registry that overrides the setting in your configuration file, and you use the one from the registry. You don't have to change your configuration file because it works because the group policy always wins, and you never have to change your config file. But what it enables them to do is it enables to go and reconfigure 10,000 desktops from one machine in about 5 minutes, if that, and have that rolled out across their organization, around the globe, around the planet, wherever like that. If you're building desktop apps and you want them to be able to reconfigure stuff in there, do take a look at group policy. One thing I am going to look at is the Windows management instrumentation. Why do we care about that? I mean, it's got the word management in for starters. You know, that's not a word for developers. What we can do very easily is expose our configuration in our own XML config files to WMI. And if we do that, what it allows the IT pro to do is go and interact with those settings and make changes to them. Now, a few of you might be sitting there thinking, I've built WMI providers before in Windows and the framework, and you can only have read-only, and that's why we didn't bother doing it. Well, we fixed that in the framework 3.5. You can now build full-blown WMI providers in the framework 3.5 in Visual Studio. So I'm going to give you a quick look at how we do that and show you what the IT pro can then do. I've got one machine here. Remember, I could be across multiple machines sitting on my backside doing reconfig of your services. So let's take a look. We're in the same project, but this time we're going to play around with the Windows Services host. And I planned that in case I blew the last demo up, which I did. So let's take a look. We've got in our configuration here, we have added a brand new spanking shiny new class. And this is a WMI provider that I've created. Now, what I want to do quickly is just show you the config. There's a couple of settings in here. This is the service console host, but the Windows one's exactly the same. The service one's exactly the same. I've got some connection strings, which have some settings there. I've also got some settings for MSMQ paths and so on. Now, at the moment, if you deploy your app and you need to change where the queues are, someone's got to edit the XML config file, which generally means that the IT pro either loads up Notepad, which is a dumb idea, or they use some sort of scripting language like VB script or PowerShell to go and rewrite the script. Whenever you're rewriting scripts, it can be error prone. So I'm going to show you a better way of enabling that. In our WMI helper, I've got a class called WMI helper. And what I've done is I've added a few things in here. One is I've got an instance here of my WMI helper, so I've got a singleton pattern going on here. I also have a publish and a revoke. So what I've got here is a little bit of code that allows me to publish a WMI provider and then unpublish it, or revoke it as they call it there. The next little piece of code I want to show you is actually the provider itself. So I don't inherit from anything. I'm not subclassing anything. It's just a class with some properties and some attributes. The attributes have changed a little bit from the previous versions of WMI. So now I've got, at the assembly level, I can specify I want WMI, and this is my namespace. So all of my WMI classes are going to go into root dinner now. That's where I'm going to put my things. I then have my class, which in .NET is called Dinner Now Service Portfolio Provider, but in WMI it's going to be called Service Portfolio. I then have a management key. Think of this as the primary key. This is how I can uniquely identify an instance of my WMI object. And then I have a management configuration, and this is a read-write value. So I'm exposing order service queue name, and the get simply goes and retrieves from app settings the value, and the set calls this nice little helper method that I wrote, which I'm going to show you. And all I do there is I load the app settings in, I make the change, and then I go and write it back out again. How else would I do it? I do exactly the same for connection strings as well, except this time I'm reading from a different part of the config file. So that's kind of neat. The last thing I need to do is make an installer. Now, this is horrendously complicated code. That's it. It's done. I'm not going to use a snippet to fill in the blanks. My installer is done. I literally inherit from default management installer and pop that on. That's if I'm building a Windows, a Visual Studio installer, as opposed to a Wix installer, which needs a bunch of XML to do it. So I'm going to start the service now. Start service, din star. I'll go back into the root and then it's not so confusing. I'm going to get the service for dinner now. So it's running. So what happens is, in my startup, I go and publish that WMI provider. So now what I should be able to do is get WMI object, namespace, which was root dinner now. And let's go and take a look at the classes that it's put in there. And you'll notice at the bottom now we have service portfolio. That's my WMI class that I've just created there. So I get WMI object now, namespace, root dinner now, class, service portfolio. There's all my values. Now I could be doing this remotely. WMI works remotely. So I could be going across the wire and getting these settings from a server somewhere in Redmond, right? That would just be risky doing this as a demo here, but you get the idea. So now I want to change that value. I can go C equals. So now I've got a variable C, which I point to. I can now do dot tab completion here. So ordering service queue name, let's make that equal to dot whack private dollar dinner now orders, and we'll put a 2 on the end. So I've changed it here. I've changed it in WMI, but I haven't told it to persist the changes back yet. I've changed like a little proxy version of it, if you like. So now what I do is I go and do a put. So yeah, we're going to do a put. That gives me a kind of OK message here. Now what I can do is go into the bin service console host and PowerShell is great. dir of all the config files and then type them to the screen. Because I can never remember what it's called. It's like dinnernow.hosts.consolehost.exe.config. But if you go and look up here, all the way at the top, we should see Windows host. And if we scroll up to the top here, we should see 2. Super duper. So we've made that change. We didn't touch the config file manually, which means we couldn't have messed it up. And that's kind of cool. I scripted it. I did it interactively, but I could now write a script that goes and runs against the 17 servers that I have deployed with my app. And I'm an IT pro now, and I've got a good hat on, and I've got a good feeling about your service now, because I've just done that change, and it only took me seconds to put it together. So that's WMI. Really easy to implement. It's a few attributes, a bit of code to go and publish it, a little bit of lateral thinking about how you get it back into your config file, but it's well worth the effort. Incidentally, there is an extension to Enterprise Library that actually implements a WMI provider read-write for all of their settings. So you'll be able to, when we release that, you'll be able to go and interact with any Enterprise Library setting like that, which is pretty cool. When I talk about admin tools, I'm really serious about this XML thing, and you know, Notepad's there. That's how easy it is to build an admin tool, isn't it? Give them Notepad. It's not very good. Typically, in a data center, 400 apps means 400 different admin tools. Would you like to work with 400 different tools? You know, Visual Studio's all together in one place, yeah, and you kind of get familiar with it. Can you imagine, you know, if you were building classes, it was one tool, but if you were building a web page, it was a completely different tool. And then if you wanted to kind of, I don't know, add some XML, it was yet another tool. Can you imagine that all the way through your experience? That's what IT pros have to put up with. Every single app has something different. Admin tools is always the thing that gets cut right It used to be security, didn't it? But we thought about that now. But admin tools just on the end of things. In script, how many times have you been asked, can you provide some scripting interface, and thought, no, I have no idea how to do that. It's easy now. It's super easy. So we have Windows PowerShell. We actually have a lot of devs working on PowerShell in Microsoft to supply commandlets for all of our server products. So sometime in the next 2 years, every single server product we do will be administered via PowerShell. If for no other reason than making it consistent, you should do the same. I kid you not. There are a few teams that may not make it into the next release. It'll be the release after, but pretty much everybody has to do it now. We have very big sticks. It's a scripting language in shell. It's absolutely fantastic. I encourage you to go and see Jeffrey Snover's talk later this week and see what we've done in V2. That'll give you a good understanding of where we're going with it. It's built on the .NET framework. So in PowerShell, I can actually create an instance of any .NET framework class I want and start interacting with it on the command line. A lot of the commands return .NET objects as well, so that's kind of cool. It's easy to extend. It's easier to build a commandlet, that's what we call commands in PowerShell, than it is to build a console app. And you're laughing now. You're going, Dave, console apps like public static void main. What could be easier than that? It's public static void main args. It's the args bit that we make much, much easier. Yeah. So if you have 5 parameters in a command line, you've got about 6,000 lines of code to parse all that and make sure to put it in right. And then your 3 lines of code that delete the file, right? In PowerShell, you have an attribute on a property that specifies exactly what the parameter is. We take care of all the parsing for you, and you have your 3 lines of code that delete the file. So we do a lot of work there to make it super easy for you. You can also host it in a GUI. So if you're not happy with command line things, and not everybody is, you can actually build a GUI on top of your command line. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. We also have MMC. MMC version 3, right? I'm not talking about MMC version 2. If you've played with MMC version 2, I'm sorry. 3 is much better. We can host managed code. That's a good plus. Second thing is that middle panel in an MMC console can be a user control now, so you can put anything you jolly well like in it. We still have all the guidelines about how big fonts should be and how much spacing there should be, but that's easy. That just means that you don't have to hire anybody to design a good GUI. You just follow our guidelines and blame us, right? That's what I do. It's great. So we can host Windows Forms, and we can also host PowerShell. So here's the value prop for you. You implement all of your admin tooling in PowerShell. What does that give you? It gives you a command line. It gives you a consistent command line. We have a whole bunch of rules about what you call things. Like we have verbs and nouns. So it's always verb hyphen noun. And we're Microsoft, so sometimes we change what verb means and what noun means, but it's verb hyphen noun most of the time. So we've got get process, get service, start service, stop service. What do you think we would do to get a mailbox in Exchange? Ooh, get mailbox. Yeah, it's very easy to work out once you know the verbs and you know what the noun should be. So you get that interactive command line, which is scriptable, which in version 2 is remotable, so you can run it on one machine and fan out. You have that power. Lay across MMC, which is a consistent user interface. It's a bit like giving them Office, but for admin tools. It makes everything look the same. Yeah. So when they're in doing users and all those kind of things, oh, there's your tool as well. It works, and they know how to use it straight away. They're familiar with it. And we can host PowerShell inside. That's how Exchange works now. If you've got the latest version of Exchange, the only way of administering Exchange is via PowerShell. There is no other way. You might think there's another way. It's just a lie. And their console lives on top of PowerShell. So if Exchange can do it, and it's not a simple product, is it? Then anybody can do it. And it's really easy. So I'm going to flip to the demo machine again. And we have to do some mad project loading here. So I'm going to open up a completely different solution. And I'm using Dinner Now as my little platform for the sample here. The WMI thing isn't in any version yet. This is, so if you want this code, you can download it and reuse it quite happily in your project. So that's one of the reasons why I'm using this here. So let's go and have a look at how we build a commandlet. That is easier than a console application. Let's go and find a commandlet first. So we have get DN service, which was already open. How's that? Now, instead of having just any old class with a static void main method in, we actually inherit from PS commandlet. PS commandlet gives us all the nice context and infrastructure we need for a commandlet. We also have to tell it what our commandlet's called. We have some collections of valid verbs, or you could make your own up, which isn't advised if one already exists. And then the noun. So this one's going to be called get DN service. Then we have parameters. Now, this command's so easy, we don't even have any parameters, but I wanted to show you what a parameter looked like. So I've got one commented out here. We can specify which position the parameter is, so we can have positional parameters and or named parameters as well. The name of this parameter will be the name of the property, but we can specify aliases as well. We're not saying this is mandatory. True, PowerShell will make sure that the parameter is there. If it's not, your code won't even execute. We won't even get that far, which is cool. We can also take values from the pipeline. Pipeline. Now I have to explain what a pipeline is. So in PowerShell, we can take the output of one commandlet and feed it in as the input of the next commandlet in the command line, or in the pipe, as we call it. It's a thing that's been around for a while in Unix and other kind of shells. So the concept isn't kind of spanking new. It is probably on the Windows platform. One of the cool thing about PowerShell is we don't output text. Now you're all sitting there going, Dave, you just did commands and text was on the screen. Man, come on, right? We output objects. And then we go, oh, we need to give you text. So we have a little thing that gets added on the end of everything called outhost, which writes it out nice on the screen so you can see it. But we actually have a real life object. For example, if I go and do, well, what was the last thing we did? Did we do a get WMI object like that? That gets me a WMI class. I can actually go and pipe that into a command called getMember, and GM's the shortcut for it. And it tells me, hey, I've got a system management object type with all the parameters and all the properties and any methods that I can interact with. So I do have an object. So I could get my command that could suck in things from the pipeline and actually act upon them. So commandlets like sorting and filtering do that. You might be able to build some of your own. We have some validation as well. So if you want to make sure it's not null or empty, it's not a bit of code you have to write. It's just an attribute that you tag on. We've got all the ones you would expect, like range values and that kind of thing. Instead of the main method, we have a process record. Sounds a bit funny, but that's what it does. And this will get called for every object that we get given from the pipeline. And then we've just got some code. Standard .NET code. You can do this in C# or VB.NET. It's irrelevant either. When we come to write things out, instead of saying console.writeLine, we say write object, and that writes the object out onto the pipeline. And it's as simple as that. Here I've got a collection. Now, how annoying is it when you've got a collection, you've got to write it out, you've got to say, for each thing in the collection, blah, blah, blah. Here we just go, hey, it's a collection, true. And we take care of the looping through the collection and writing out the individual objects for you. So we've even made that easier, right? So all this one does, if you're wondering what the commandlet does, is we go and query WMI and we go and get some service information from WCF. I can dinner now. I'm just going to make sure that it's loaded, and then I'll show you what get DN service does. What it does is it queries the WMI that's already in WCF. All I did was I turned it on with a config setting, and it tells me which of the services for dinner now are running and which aren't. That's all my commandlet does. Pretty easy. I can go and then take that and sort it and filter it and pipe it into other things if I need to. The other great one we've got is get workflow. And we use the workflow tracking database to go and suck all the workflows out and give you a list of all the ones that's running, when they started, and things like that. I've had to shrink my screen down to so you guys can see it. That's why the end column's like squished on the side there. We can also do kind of GUI things as well. So I'm going to go get workflow instance, workflow instance ID. I'm just going to pick one from said list. And I'm going to output that to another command that we wrote called out workflow. So we're allowed to display GUI things. And what we've got here is we stole from the SDK the little workflow viewer and pushed it inside a little Windows form, which we just show from our PowerShell commander. And that's kind of cool. And you know what? We use these all the time when we're like trying to find out why din and now doesn't work and all those kind of things. So that's kind of cool. And like I say, you can download those, go and use them in your apps. They're great. Now, what about a GUI? So that's the PowerShell side of things. What about a GUI? Well, by far the easiest way of doing this is to create a run space. So we have an whole API that allows us to create a PowerShell run space. That's what we call the little engine that does stuff. Here I'm creating a run space. I'm loading my command that's in. And then I create my little run space and open it up. So that's almost like creating a connection to a database, right? Then I need to go and execute my command. So here's my command. I create a pipeline. It's a bit like creating a SQL command. I go and add a command to it, add any parameters to it. Then I go and invoke it, and I get a collection of results back, which I then enumerate through and pop on a display. And it's exactly the same as using a database connection or anything like that. We get some results back. We have to do something with it. So we have an MMC snap-in, and just configure that. If I click on Workflow Monitor here, what it does is it calls into the PowerShell command and says get workflow, gets all the results back, and then puts them into a list view on the screen there. When I click on one of the workflows, it calls into PowerShell, gets the workflow instance, gets the data back, and then goes and slaps it on the screen in the same SDK stolen thing we used for the out workflow commandlet. So we give them a nice little admin tool. It took ages to put this together, like a good hour. And this included the artistic skills. It's called Get DN Service here. You'll be impressed with this. Look at that. And we recently updated all the services in Dinner now, so we tweaked the commandlet. We didn't do anything to the GUI. And it just pulls back all the new services because we just call the command get DN service, we get a collection of things back, and we just render them on the screen like that. The graph, by the way, is just a JPEG. We just wanted to show you what it would look like had you more kind of cleverness to actually wire that up to something live. But all of the total calls and everything do actually work. So if we were to run the app and do stuff in it, we'd start seeing the numbers changing and things like that. And again, this took, a couple of hours to put together and test. And it shows if you look at the code. Super. So that's admin tools. And the great thing is that I know some people go, we've got to build an admin tool. And it's a nightmare because you need to figure out how to lay it out and all. You don't. It's going to be a console. It's going to be a set of commandlets. The commandlets are really easy. If you read the docs on building them and the guidance we have, we explain exactly how you discover which commandlets you should build. So we even take you through that process of figuring out what makes a good admin task. It's not tweaking each individual setting. It's what are they doing. It could be like enable-encryption. That changes 27 settings in your config file, but it's one task they do. Deployment. This is a real photograph of a real T-shirt in a real office somewhere in Microsoft that was taken a few years back. And it was pretty much, I don't care if it works on your machine, we're not shipping your machine, right? I feel like that all the time with some of the stuff we build. It's like, Dave, I can't get it working on my machine. I'm like, I'm not shipping your machine. And then I think, no, I'm the management guy. I shouldn't say things like that. I also did a search, and actually there's a few blog postings you can go and find. Works on my machine. There's actually a logo program that you can put on your software. Works on my machine. Cool. So deployment, we want to build an installer. It's not rocket science. It's not kind of some wonderful kind of thing going on. It's just build a darn installer, right? You use them every day. At least you do if you have a machine as flaky as mine. And build one for your own application. There's a couple of ways to do it. One is in Visual Studio. You can do file new, set up project, and go through that route. And that works. It's great, right? There's also the Wix framework, which allows you to declare the deployment through XML. It's a source. It's on source Forge or something like that. It's actually written by a few guys who work in buildings nearby me. So it is a Microsoft thing, but it's open source. I don't know how that works. And an uninstall is just important. So sometimes you have to build setup scripts, like you need to go and set up a database, create a few users, that kind of thing. And you never, ever, and I know, write the bit that deletes the users and deletes the database, right? We don't. We build in and out, and we don't clean up after ourselves, right? We just assume that if you haven't put a demo code on the VPC, that you're asking for trouble, really. Perhaps you're not, but we should still have an uninstall. And if you build a good installer, you will get 90% of a good uninstaller as well. Those little extra things like cleaning up the database are always great things to do there. We now have a policy in our team. We're not allowed to manually change configuration when we're building a demo or a sample or anything like that. We have to write a script for it. So if I need to go in and go, right, I need to add this certificate so I can show some card space things, I have to write a script that adds the certificate. The reason being is, if I spend a day hacking around in my machine, A, I won't know what I've done to get it working, and B, there's no way in hell you're going to get it working if I don't know how I got it working. And that's what happens with a lot of demos. You see the presenters doing the demo, and if it works, and then you go, can I have the code? And you go, yeah, and they send you a zip, and with no README, no instructions, no setup or anything like that. So our team's trying to change the world and fix that. But your software is the same. We need to be able to install it and uninstall it. So quick demo. I know I have 13 minutes left, which is kind of unlucky. So I decided you can go and file new setup project in Visual Studio on your laptops tonight, but you might not be able to do the Wix thing. So I thought, let's show them some Wix things. So in my solution, I'm just going to flip back to the service portfolio and just take a second to load up. In fact, there's one project that I'm starting on, and we're trying to see if all this test-driven development really works, right? To see if it really improves our experience, right? So here's the thing. I wrote a test, and then I wrote a class, and then I made the test pass. Cool. The next thing I did was I built the installer. So now I have the whole infrastructure set up. I have an installer that installs a class that doesn't do anything, because my test was literally create an instance of the class. But that's where we're going to with this, a proper engineering process, my father would tell me it was. I'm going to tell you what he calls what we do, but super. So here's Wix. It's XML. It's kind of cool. I'm in Visual Studio 2008. If you're in 2005, you have all sorts of project templates, and you get all the IntelliSense. They don't have the 2008 version baked yet, because we don't have 2008 baked yet. So I guess they'll match up when we ship the thing. But pretty much all we've got to do is describe our installation. So here we've got some stuff at the top. I need to give my product an ID, tell it what it's called, give it some GUIDs for upgrade codes and things like that. That's really important. We might ship version 1 and then have a fix. What do? We ship another big, huge 700 meg MSI that replaces the first one. No, we just ship a little patch. Yeah, that would be a good idea. So we have some upgrade codes in. This is my carb. I'm going to go into the program files folder into a thing called dinner now service. And then I specify all my source files and what I want them called on the destination. It's almost easy. It's a lot of typing if you're putting this on the project at the end. But the way Rob tells you to do it, Rob's the Wix man. He says, every time you add an output to your project, you go and update your Wix file so that you always have your installer. In fact, I would go as far to say, as part of your daily build, you should throw out an MSI that somebody can go and take and install and completely have configured and run. Because we're deploying a service, I actually have some service control things in here. So again, I declare, hey, that's a service. This is the service exe. I want it to install. I want it to auto run. I've commented it out here because I know my demo won't work tomorrow if I go and try and deploy this service on the service that's already there. So that's fine. You might argue that my demo wouldn't work tomorrow anyway, but that's just harsh, I think. If you're familiar with an installer, you can pick different components to install. You can define different components here as well. So I could have one installer that has different services, and installers work great for distributed apps as well. It's not just a desktop app I'm doing here. I'm deploying a Windows service with it. I then have some fluffiness for logos and license agreements and things like that. So the whole framework's geared up to build the quality install you would expect. So let's go and pop in. Oh, and one more thing to show you. I need to build the installer. So I wrote a little PowerShell script to go and call candle and then light, which are the two compiler linkers that you need for Wix that builds you the MSI. Isn't that cute? They have a whole theme of fire things. It's quite worrying when you go meet them. Now, we need to go into Dinner Now Solution, Dinner Now Service Portfolio, Source, Dinner Now Wix Setup. There's my little PowerShell file. I've actually got the MSI there already, which I'll delete. So I haven't got it there now. Now it won't work, but I run build installer. We call candle. We'll get one warning about my icon being pointless, is how I read the little warning there. That's okay because nobody ever sees that bit. In fact, the true Dinner Now package, Dinner Now, we actually shipped like several thousand source files in Wix. So we actually automated the generation of Wix, which is kind of cool. And it has loads of warnings and it still works great. So now I go and run the installer. So my bitmaps are in and everything like that. Welcome. Next, accept the license agreement. So we've got a little slot to put that in. Why do we want to install it? Remember I said we default program files. We can change that, but we're going to go for the default. Click on install and then go away, copy all the files. It would install the service and set it up running if I'd enabled that thing. If we go and have a quick look in program files, I've now got a Dinner Now folder. And my machine, by the way, is 7:53 a.m. I don't change the time for some reason. But here. Why does it say 7:12 on the install? That's when we hit build the last time, I think. So there's all my files that are specified in the installer in the right place there. Wix also allows me to create event sources. It allows me to go and set up databases. It allows me to go and configure websites, everything. And if there's something missing, do let the Wix people know. They're aiming to get like full coverage. And the more people that say, can you allow us to install a certificate, the more chance they'll have of bumping that up the list and getting it done. So I do encourage you to feedback if you do take up on the Wix thing. So we want you to build manageable applications. Do take a look at the tooling that we have coming. It's a bit rough at the moment. December or January CTP is when you'll first be able to get a full end-to-end experience of that. Do instrument your application. Do tell the outside world what's going on. Even if it's just when something goes wrong and you write an event of the log that says, something's broken, restart me. That is better than them calling you up for you to check the code out to see the bit where they got to ring them back and tell them to restart it, right? Create admin tools. Use PowerShell MMC. They're the two bestest, favoriteest things. All of our server products will be using PowerShell to do stuff with. So it's a good bandwagon to jump on. And create installers. Just in, out, in, out. So what's next? Couple of things. There is a new WMI provider model in Visual Studio 2008 in the framework 3.5. Super duper. That's great. So when you get there, when you get the point where you can move up to 3.5, you will get that read-write benefit. We also have a completely new event infrastructure, event log infrastructure in Vista and Longhorn Server, which you can now get at with Visual Studio as well. We've got the designer, which I mentioned, and we also have PowerShell v2. Do go along to Jeffrey's talk for that. We have 5 minutes left for any questions. I would like to thank you very much for being kind and coming along to this session. Hope it was useful for you. Please do complete the feedback. You may even win a thing like that, phone. And it's kind of cool. I've had to play with one, and they're fantastic. So please do feedback. Apparently the 9 key works really well. Just a hint. Thank you very much. So questions, great. Yes, question. You can come down. The generation of the setup script.
It appears to be in some kind of ini file, a definition, but the ini file is not documented. So I feel scared.
Right, is that a specific, are you in the Visual Studio setup projects, or where are you with this setup script?
It's just in my some command line tool.
Right. We need to chat more about that so I can figure out exactly where the problem is you're having, and I will do that right after we've had any more questions. So if you can hang around for 5 minutes, that'd be fantastic. Any other questions? People are still sitting here, or are you just waiting for the next session? Question there. Yep. So the question is the kit extensible? So can you add your own destinations for events and perf counters? Absolutely, that's one of the goals. It might not make it into the CTP. The goal is to have it in the CTP so that you can plug in enterprise library or your own thing. So we'll have some interface thing that you'll have to implement more than likely. And then we're hoping that you can plug your thing straight into the designer. That's the goal. I would argue, why would you want to go to your own event source? I know all the reasons why you would want to go, but it's some people think it's the default choice. The default choice is something else. And if you're happy that you've exhausted all of the other places to put it, then a custom place is good. It doesn't matter because Tivoli, Unicenter, HP OpenView all use the event log, WMI, and all those other things. So whilst we want to obviously give you a great story, we're going to spread out CML. We're going to split out that modeling language that we keep ranting about. So all the other tool vendors can go and consume it and monitor your app as well. Yeah. Obviously, we're going to make it sure that Ops Manager shines in this thing, but it will work for everything else. You can absolutely host PowerShell in anything, including ASP.NET. Helm, anybody heard of Helm? They have this web console for managing web servers and things like that. They've just done it, but it's an absolute doddle. There's some threading issues and some parsing issues, which we fix in V2, but there's workarounds in V1, so it is absolutely doable. Right, that question next. Woo. Right. So the question is around 32, 64-bit support in Wix. At the moment, I'm guessing you're saying it doesn't detect whether you're on a 48-bit platform. A 64-bit platform. Have you fed back to any of the news groups or anything that information? So you absolutely can send me an email. The email is d.aiken, and if I go to the first slide, the easiest thing to do is go david.aiken@microsoft.com. That works. Drop me an email with exactly that in, as much information as you can, including a sample, and I will forward it on to the Wix people and say, hey, a whole bunch of people came up to me at TechEd and said this, right? But if it's forwarded on, you'll appreciate it works much better when somebody else says it. So brilliant, thanks for that. There, I think, was... what the tooling does is it builds that management pack. Now, you may be building the management pack now by hand, right? It's a nightmare, right? It really is. It's like a whole new world because some IT pros made it up, didn't talk to the dev people on how you might make these kind of things. So we've got this really lovely, rich XML-based description of a management pack that the tooling around it is not developer focused. It's more for the IT pro who's got your app with some events that they know about and they're fixing it. Where we're going is we're going stepping back a bit and going, hang on a minute. If we know the instrumentation you have and you give us a little bit of info about what it means, we can generate the management pack for you. And then the IT pro just loads it in, and then they might tweak it and might mess around with it, but we're going to give them a whole bunch of stuff that they can just use out of the box. So probably the best thing, since I don't know your situation, if you need help with that, I'll be more than willing to help you. Drop me an email with your details and everything like that, and I will get back in touch with you next week after this stuff's over with. I'll be absolutely love if anybody's doing this kind of thing and needs any help with it, please get in touch. We're really interested in finding people that are doing this stuff and helping them out. Even if it's to validate our tooling sucks, we'd like to help you, right? We've met with a few customers already. We're getting a few more in the pipeline. We have a whole way of helping you. That's quite clever. We can work on your project to a degree. We can get you with the product teams in Redmond and all those kind of things. So if this is a goal you have of building your apps more manageable, then we can help you a lot with this. We might have a PR agreement ask at some point. We might not. It's not a prerequisite. So the offer's there. Please use it. Question? So the question's around Wix and custom actions and managed code. So every once in a while, I go back to Wix and say, why can't we do actions in managed code? And they give me this usually 2 or 3 page thing that they've worked out on why you shouldn't do it, right? Not why you couldn't do it, right? Not why, it's why you shouldn't do it. And the problem lies around the framework. If you have a custom action written and it uses one version of the framework, that's what version gets loaded. And every other action must work in that version of the framework and not in any other. Otherwise, the whole thing falls over. That's the problem it has. So I go, well, hang on. If you're writing and installing, you write all your custom actions that target the framework too, won't it be okay? Because I'm kind of positive. And they go, no, you shouldn't do the thing in the managed code because of blah, 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 blah. So I encourage you to feed back to the forums and myself. We want to be able to do this, right? The more people that tell them, the more chance they have of fixing it. Isn't it frustrating? Yeah. So here's the thing. The Visual Studio installer today lets you build custom actions in managed code, and they don't bitch about it. So yeah, I've got a pretty good idea we're going to fix it, right? I know we're going to fix it. I don't have a timeline, I don't have a product or anything like that. I just know they're going to fix it, right? So now you can certainly build it yourself and do a custom action, but we're going to make it better. I'm pretty sure we're going to make it better. Don't hold me to that, right? But I just know where we're going with it, and we should make it better. If we don't, it'll be sad, quite honestly. There's a whole bunch of glasses down here, and my knees against them all, and they're all about to tip over, so I'm going to stand here a little bit. Any more questions? Yes? Right. So let me repeat the question there. If I get it right, be great. In the designer, if I can paraphrase, we can specify red and green and have a formula. We can also specify amber, which means it's not broken and it's not working. it's probably working, but perhaps not meeting SLAs, or it's on its way down or something. At the moment in the tool, it's kind of a very defined thing. If you see this event, it's red. When you go in Ops Manager, it gets more fuzzy and it gets more fun. What you can do is you can say, well, you know, if this event hasn't been there for 5 minutes, go yellow. And then if you're missing some more, you could escalate to red. You can have one event that turns it red and no events that turn it green. You can have 3 events that switch between all different states and all sorts of different combinations. In the first version of the tool, we're going to be very limited in what we map for the management pack, because we want to kind of be very general. But I would imagine that the further down the line the tool gets, the more support we'll have for all of the different detection processes that Ops Manager has. So out of the box in day 1 will be red, green, event form will be very basic. But there's nothing stopping you then from taking the management pack and loading it into the MP authoring tool and actually going changing that. Yeah. What it saves you doing, obviously, is generating the management pack in the first place. Yes. It does. So, but you can plug your own logging in. But you've already asked the question about that. So here's the thing. We're really interested in logging that the IT pro is going to find useful. So that tends not to be thousands of log entries. That tends to be 1 or 2. So sometimes when you're tracing, when you're on that next level in the call center and things, they need more information, right? And that's a trace file. Auditing's separate, right? I wouldn't use this for auditing, right? You're going to tune that, customize it. This is really about getting that event out to the IT pro going, I'm bust, fix me, yeah? I'm not working, or wherever. It's not about hitting 7,000 log entries on there. You could use it for that, and certainly in Longhorn Server, the eventing infrastructure is that you can actually throw it at thousands of events and it just, yeah, come on, give me some more. It's great, but you know, how useful is that?